Witcher 3 is one of the most critically praised games of the last generation. In this review, all the elements I talk about or criticize are all relevant elements with significant impact on the gaming experience. So I'm not nitpicking when I say that I am one of the smaller minority of people who don't like Witcher 3 that much, who thinks it is one of the most overrated game of the last generation. Let's talk about the combat first. Witcher 3 combat has all the right elements tuned up in a wrong way. Even though there is block and counter, the player is highly dependent upon the dodge mechanics, which is the single most important mechanic in combat. Most of the time I feel like a rabbit hopping away from the enemies. A badass master witcher like Geralt should not run away from enemies. He should fight it head on. The combat is tuned up in such a way that it is nearly impossible to get yourself in the middle of enemies and finish them up in a badass way. Also, the dodging is also not that satisfying. A recurring issue with the gameplay is that things which are difficult do not have a high reward. The counter mechanics is significantly riskier than dodge, but doesn't have the proportionate reward it should have. Dodging is significantly easier and provides the same level of offensive advantage and power as a counter attack. So no one bothers mastering the counter attack. The same situation persists with the blocking. You would never find yourself cornered in such a way that which prevents you from executing a dodge, which is easier and more profitable and far riskier and far less riskier than blocking. All you need to master in the combat in this game is dodge, and it doesn't take much time to do so. Dodging doesn't take up much stamina too. You could keep spamming without any repercussions. Stamina conservation and management is a great way to add depth to the combat and makes it more fun. Witcher 3 has this, but is tuned up in such a way that it does not have any effects at all. Only in the higher difficulties, like the highest difficulties, there's some form of effect, but not that much. The combat has everything you could ask for. A fast attack, a strong attack, dodge, longer dodge, stamina bar, another adrenaline bar which acts as a combo meter, and an additional stamina bar later, and a toxicity bar which you need to manage. There are so many systems, but the bad tuning ruins all of it. These issues are present and remains the same in higher difficulties too. The adrenaline bar, which works as a combo meter, which in most other games add a depth of layer and difficulty, can easily be ignored in Witcher 3. The effect of the adrenaline bar is unnoticeable. It's so irrelevant that it does not need to be added. And if it is added, it needs to be tuned up in such a way that it feels relevant. Games like Devil May Cry thrive on using combo meter, but in Witcher 3, this is just another element of wasted potential. Even some kinds of visual indicator which was much more noticeable would have added some fun into it. Stamina conservation needs to be more important if the combat aims to be much more fun. The way to make something in a game fun is by forcing the brain to calculate or think of solving an issue. This is not present in Witcher 3's stamina conservation mechanics. The whirlwind and rend mechanics should have been introduced much earlier in the game. It would have added more depth and style to the combat. If someone told me about the combat system with light and strong attacks, dodge and longer dodge, stamina bar, toxicity bar, etc., it would seem to me like a picture perfect, like good on paper type of combat system in a fantasy RPG game. Witcher 3, despite having all of this, falls incredibly short in properly implementing these mechanics. If a combat does not have the depth, it should have been at least be difficult. Anyone can master dodge mechanics fairly quickly, even on blood and broken bones difficulty. The sword, which for any fantasy lovers is the most interesting elements, looks and feel like a long needles. The slashing is not satisfying at all. It feels as if the enemy is being scratched by the tip of the sword. Because of the distance of the camera from Geralt, it also not possible to admire the sword while also playing them. Also, most of them don't feel like enough to feel like a powerful sword. It does not have much of a weight. The runes are a switch off in about 2 seconds after drawing in the sword, so there's always that too. The combat mechanics are varied but ultimately useless. All you need to master is dodging and the block and the counter mechanics. Even though it is difficult to pull it off, does not have the proportionate reward something difficult should have. The dodging mechanics does not require much timing. So in effect, the combat of The Witcher 3 should make you feel like a badass sword master, like Geralt supposed to be. Instead, you feel like a coward who always trying to get the hell out of the way. However, there is the whirlwind mechanic who should have been introduced much earlier in the game, which is satisfying and rewarding and makes you feel like a badass witcher, which is gracefully dancing around his enemies and slicing them gracefully. Also, the whirlwind is also very cool to look at. However, it should have been at least taken 20 hours to unlock it if you're playing the game on a proper open world RPGs. The sword enchantment archive by placing ruins on sword is very much unreliable due to them being probability based. They only works once or twice, say in 5 fights, and in majority of the fights you do not get to experience them. Let's talk about the RPG mechanics. The progression in this game is the most lame, uninteresting progression system I've ever seen in a highly acclaimed RPG. A good skill tree should make you feel torn between two good upgrades. Instead, in Witcher 3, I am torn between two seemingly useless and uninteresting upgrade systems, which are all percentage based, which are very hard to notice during gameplay. The primary modes of offense in this game is the melee combat. Magic and alchemy works as a secondary trait, which are useless without the sword play. The problem is that magic and alchemy are on par with the fighting skill tree in terms of importance. This makes it impossible to invest in alchemy or magic without neglecting the sword play, which you cannot neglect. What they should have done is to separate the melee combat skill tree with the magic and the alchemy. The choice should have been alchemy and magic, because you can survive by using magic and alchemy in the place of other. Therefore, the choice should be about combat and magic or combat and alchemy, not combat or magic or alchemy. That way you can roleplay perfectly as a witcher who uses the magic or a witcher who uses the alchemy. Another issue of the progression skill is that most of the upgrades you unlock cannot be experienced in the gameplay. It does not feel like making it any difference, even though it probably is. Some of the skills are quite cool, but they are very low in numbers and takes time to unlock. The next issue is the weapon collection. Even though Witcher 3 has a large but balanced collection of swords, it cannot be enjoyed without sacrificing power. In the introductory sequence, if you dare to explore a little bit, you will run into instructions to make the Viper sword set, which cannot be matched in power by most of the sword you find at least until level 15. So you cannot use all the better looking swords which you find until then. The same issue with the armor set, which you will rarely see an armor that matches the default Witcher armor in style. The enemy variety in this game is one of its better moments and better qualities. The game has wide collection of monsters of nearly every type imaginable with their own weakness, strength and similarities. Even though every monster has a section in their bestiary, there are specific weaknesses and behaviors which you learn directly from the experience. The rot fiend would explode when it almost dead, so you should clear it off from its vicinity. That goes for every single monster. There is always something going on in every single enemy types in this game. Each have its weaknesses and strengths. Although Witcher has many issues with this gameplay, it definitely sets the benchmark for enemy variety, which may not sound much but is of highest importance in a game about professional monster hunter, and especially for a game that lasts about 150 hours long. For years, RPG games have been searching for much realistic way to implement player experience. In Witcher 3, the experience isn't implemented only on numbers, which improves your effectiveness. The real experience is required to become a master monster hunter. You need to hands-on experience on fighting the monsters to effectively defeat them. You need to observe and understand their behaviors. The bestiary just provides the basic info for your bare survivor. So I like it. It's one of the best stuff in this game. Witcher 3 is a game with massive hidden potential. All the bombs in this game look damn awesome. Some of the bombs can be chained up with other bombs and spells to create a satisfying combination of explosions. But the problem with the gameplay rarely demands it. There are several slow motion moves in this game. The best one, which are of Ciri's powers, and the other one is Geralt's finisher. Is certain alchemy power which enables the slow-mo when the enemy encounters. All of which are very cool to look at. The slow motion effect of Ciri's moves is the best looking I've ever seen in this game. And this particular moves, which enables Ciri to attack multiple opponents at the same time with her time manipulation, is the single best move of this game. Witcher 3 also has a problem of not delivering some of its promises in its gameplay. There should be elements of preparation that go into facing difficult enemies. But by at least 10 hours into the game, you get most of the things you rarely find in the gameplay department. You've seen almost everything in terms of gameplay mechanics. The next element is the unnecessarily vastness, the emptiness, and the lack of diversity in the open world. There is no such thing in the lay of the land when talking about the open world. Most of the places almost looks the same, and there is a huge lack of direction when moving forward. It is heavily dependent on minimap, which takes away from the immersion and prevents the player from properly enjoying the scenery. You cannot look at the scenery if you constantly looking at the minimap to move around. You will not get a general idea of where you are, and you rarely ever encounter something that genuinely surprises you when you out there exploring the open world. All in all, I am extremely disappointed with this game. There are some very strong elements in this game that I really did like the enemy variety, the combat encounters, and there are some fun little mechanics that are implemented in this game that are very good ideas but are not well executed. So I hope that in the next game they improve upon it. That's it for today's video. In the next video, I'll be talking about the RPG elements of Witcher 3 in terms of its choices. So check out for that video.